Ted, my brother.
There he is. How you doing, man?
I blessed. How about yourself?
I'm blessed and highly favored, doing great. Just me and the pup, Bruno. He's over next to me, enjoying a nice little Friday.
Bro, first of all, I'm just gonna start off by saying I love the two-piece suit. I did notice that you wear that often on when you're on camera, so I just wanted to acknowledge that. I'm a huge fan of two-piece suit.
Yeah. Hey, so I wear my normal suit Monday through Thursday. Every Friday, I wear a vest. And I always tell people, hey, listen, Fridays aren't just the best day, it's the best day. And my viewers know they always wear the vest. I always wear the vest on Fridays. It's just my thing. I love kind of turning down a little bit and getting comfortable. It's my favorite to do.
I love that. I love that you have that theme on that. So before we jump in, because we're gonna have so much fun in this conversation, as we've connected before this, and the energy's just been flowing back and forth. I just want to introduce you to my audience. So Ted Phaeton is a meteorologist from North Carolina, Charlotte, as well as the host of an amazing podcast, which I'm gonna have the honor to be a guest on in a couple of weeks, which is the Modern Man Podcast. So Ted, my brother, and for your audience, my name is Dedeyan. I'm a professional speaker and a peak performance coach. So let's start off by just asking, how is your Friday? Because I know that your Friday, or every day of the week for you pretty much, is completely different from 99.9% of the population, me included as well, even though I'm an early riser.
Yeah. So I went to work a little early this morning. And for some people, they think early, okay, you're thinking 7 a.m., maybe 6 a.m. No, I was halfway through my day by then. I woke up at about midnight. I had to go into work at 1 a.m. For a lot of folks, if you're along the East Coast, you're getting impacted by this big bad storm called Nicole. That had me working early. Shout out to my team that had my back, but also prayers and thoughts with everybody in Florida. Daytona Beach got slammed with it. The long story short, being in North Carolina, we had some major impacts. So my chief meteorologist stayed till 1 a.m. I came in, relieved her at 1 a.m. And as we always say, it's, hey, good to see you. Just wish it was under better circumstances and brighter sunlight. But it was a good day, actually. One of those days that, you know, in our business, I always say what we do isn't necessarily hard, right? It's a skill. It's kind of like asking Cristiano Ronaldo if soccer is hard. Sure, winning a game might be difficult, but for him, soccer, he's been playing it his whole life. These are the days where our skills get to shine. These are the days where I wouldn't say we get tested, but these are the days where it's more important, where it's nice and sunny, a beautiful day out, everybody's your friend. But when you have tornado warnings, you have the threat of a tornado watch, flash flood warnings are happening right now in the mountain counties, so you have flood watches. You know, this is more of kind of some high level information that could save lives, right? It's a little bit more impactful. And these are really the days that we study for, we train for. And I'm thankful that the knowledge that I have can maybe save someone's life, can reduce someone's experience heading out on the road. This morning we had a few accidents. Luckily, it wasn't a terrible day of accidents, partly because it was Veterans Day. Thank you to all the veterans out there, but also because people were able to listen. I said this morning, give yourself extra time to get to work, and hopefully they heed that warning. And finally got out of work. Our show was from 4 a.m. to 10 a.m. and just got home about 15 minutes ago. Even still have my makeup on. I don't know if you can see that.
Okay, bro, you're ready for this show. I didn't put on makeup, but if I would have known, bro, I would have asked my sister to give me some stuff. So I would have been your partner in that. Okay, I want to highlight. First and foremost, on the latter part of my question, I do want to talk about the tornadoes that's happening in South Florida, Southeast, and so on. But before doing so, you acknowledge something, or you put it in such an eloquent way, and you compared it to Cristiano Ronaldo or any athlete, the comparison between the skill that you have and the easy aspect that comes with it, or the hard work. So if you're Cristiano Ronaldo, Kobe Bryant, or anybody, Michael Jordan, is it hard for them to do the sport? No, it's because they put in so much work that it becomes second nature for them. They go in that state of flow. And moments that you could really just get into that zone and really put in the work that you need to get that information out there. And the way that you correlated that you're just such at a high level of communicating as a meteorologist, as a communicator on TV, that it becomes second nature to you is very interesting to talk about, because it's not something that's difficult when you're doing it. But I'm sure it took you a lot of time getting to that point, just like it took Cristiano a lot of time, just like it took LeBron James a lot of time to become an elite at their sports. I do wanted to highlight that, finding that state of flow with the skill compared to the difficulty level with your skill set. So that's one thing I wanted to highlight that you did a really good job at. And second thing that I wanted to kind of mention over here, let's unpack this aspect of what is exactly happening in the Southwest, because this is the second one in literally, the other one was like, what, 2-3 weeks ago, if I'm not mistaken, a month ago.
Yeah.
Like, what's happening? Is there, like, yeah, like, what it is?
So honestly, I don't necessarily see something that's completely out of the norm, but I would say it's uncharacteristic for us to have this late of a storm impact Florida. So in terms of Nicole, it was the second East Coast landfall this late in the season for the month of November to happen for Florida. The first one was, I think, 1935 or 1938, just a very long time ago. We typically don't see a lot of activity through the month of November. Now, we've had uncharacteristically warm temperatures, a little bit of a late start to our hurricane season, and we've held on to that warmth a little bit longer. So the Atlantic, the Gulf of Mexico, that's the ocean waters that feed these tropical systems, right? They're still holding on to a lot of warmth. They still have that fuel. The sea surface temperatures have to be 80 degrees to spark the development of a tropical cyclone. So now that we still have those warm conditions, we're seeing the environment conducive to these tropical storms develop. And then, unfortunately, as we get late in the season, the way these storms develop are typically in the southern Atlantic and towards the Gulf of Mexico. That puts Florida right in the bullseye. What we saw with Ian, that was developed in the southern Caribbean Sea, and then that trucked into the southern Gulf of Mexico and kind of made a U-turn and went right through from the west coast of Florida, hitting Fort Myers, and then all the way up. Well, what we saw with Nicole was a little different, but it still came up from the Caribbean Sea and impacted the East Coast and then curved up. What we're seeing now is also the clash of very cold temperatures and very warm temperatures. So what we talk about weather is nothing but the heat from the equator trying to get to the cold at the poles, and the cold from the poles trying to get to the heat at the equator. Well, hot and cold don't mix very, very friendly. They don't. And when you have the situation of what Nicole is giving to a lot of people in Pennsylvania right now, a lot of people in New York, a lot of people up the East Coast is getting inundated with these heavy downpours and all this rain. That's because you have Nicole, which is bringing this big blob of tropical moisture and warmth. We're at like 75 degrees today in North Carolina. That might not sound too warm, but a couple of days ago, we broke a record high of 79 degrees. We hit 81, 82. So wow. These are unprecedented warm temperatures. And you have this warmth that's blasting this cold air that's now coming down. I think we were in the teens for North Dakota. So when you have that cold air blasting in the south, that's what's going to spark the heavy downpours that's really squeezing over parts of Tennessee up to Pennsylvania right now. And even further in our forecast, Chris, I said today we have tropical moisture, low to mid 70s. Saturday, tomorrow is going to be 71 degrees. Sunday is going to be 52 to 54. And then by Tuesday, I'm looking at snow in the mountain counties. In a span of less than 5 days, you're going from a tropical system to a potential winter system. It's unprecedented.
Okay, so you mentioned something, and bro, you're very eloquently explaining this weather system. Obviously, it's your job, right? And it goes with the way that you're kind of explaining it. But I'm like learning concepts I've never learned about with the heat and the cold and the equator and the North Poles. And one thing that I'm alluding to, or one thing that I'm correlating it to, is actually two things. First and foremost, global warming is playing a role with this, because we are seeing just naturally, and this, I'm not an expert, I'm just seeing over here where I live in Montreal, Canada, our winters are not as cold as they were when I was younger. It takes longer for the snow to happen. And one thing that I've always said, Montreal is very bipolar with this weather. Just like you explained, one could be super, super warm. Next day it could be cold. There could be rain. There could be snow. So it's kind of all over the place. And what you're explaining is essentially what's happening right now in North Carolina, that bipolarism of the weather from one day to another just doesn't make sense. If we switch the conversation, just like a warm front, my transitions, bro. So the warm front in regards to your career as a meteorologist, being in a TV, how did that happen? Is that something you designed? happen by fluke? Is that something that happens easily? Talk to us a bit about that.
I would say I'm lucky I fell into it, but it's kind of following that intuition. I fell into it because I had no other choice. And what I mean by that is in high school, I played video games. I played on the computer. I was a gamer. I was a bit of a nerd. Still love to play games whenever I have the chance to, but I'm a grown man now, so I don't have as much time. But I built my own computer in high school when I was 17, and I had a spark that I wanted to do computer engineering. So I got into Penn State School of Engineering, but they wanted me to go to an off-campus for the first 2 years, one of those small little satellite campuses. They didn't give me much money. I also got into SUNY Albany in upstate New York, and my parents said, hey, you can go to Penn State, be an engineer, or you can go to SUNY Albany and we'll get you a car, just for money-wise. So I did what every 17, 18-year-old guy would do is, I'm going to Albany. I want the car. They didn't have computer engineering. They had computer science. So some people are thinking, okay, what's the difference? Computer engineering is like 90% working on the hardware, creating the latest technology, building these iPhones, things like that. 10% software. Computer software is the complete opposite. It's 90% new iOS update, this, the other thing, programming, coding, and all that, which, side note, hindsight being 2020, I would be a lot richer right now if I went with one of those. But I did pick computer science, thinking it was the same thing. I was like, sure, why not? Long story short, first year, joined a fraternity, didn't take school seriously, was not involved in the material at all, did not really enjoy it. I had a 1.9 GPA. I used to hide that information because I thought that was a reflection of my intelligence, but now I know it's just a reflection of my effort. Mm-hmm. I had a 1.9 GPA. I was on academic probation, and I was getting ready to fail out of school, and I was on vacation. Might have had a few drinks in me with some of my friends, and we're by the beach, and I talked about the tide, and this bird dived in. I remember it vividly. It came out with a fish in its mouth, and I started talking about, oh, I think it's like high tide because look how small the beach is, and you know, I think there's a full moon, so the water can get pulled up more. And my friend was like, Ted, how do you know this? And I was just like, man, I always loved earth science. Mm. And he looked at me and goes, you know, our school has a great meteorology program, right? And I literally took a sip of my drink and I just said, I think I'm going to do that. And there's a lot more to that story, but like that's kind of how I decided, like, let's study weather.
Okay. So, see, I didn't even know that there's a schooling for that. Like, ignorant, mm-hmm. I had no idea. So the fact that you went to that and you had that, first of all, that love or that understanding, and it's funny sometimes how information comes to you. Very similar for me. I went into coaching because one of my good friends, I was a professional speaker at the time, kind of took me and slapped me around, being like, yo, Chris, why are you waiting in between speeches? Why don't you coach people? There's people that you really could serve with your knowledge, and I hadn't seen it. So sometimes having that outside perspective, and in this situation, your friend listening to you being like, bro, what you're spitting out with the information is not people know naturally. And then we're like, hey, we have this. It's kind of like this other force telling you what to do and guiding yourself towards that and being open towards it. And once you were in that, did you feel that click right away? Be like, oh yeah, this is something that I'm going to love. And it was like kind of meant for me, or you kind of developed that relationship? All right, you're kind of nodding your head. Go for it.
So after I decided to study meteorology, I went home and I signed up for weather classes. Dynamics of the atmosphere, thermodynamics of the atmosphere specifically was one of the classes I signed up for. So I go to class my sophomore year, 8:15 p.m., very first class. I sit kind of in the middle. And the first words out of the professor's mouth was, who's Ted Phaeton? And I'm like, me? He's like, you're in the wrong class, but sit here and tell me if you want to do this after. And he spends the next 45 minutes, Chris, talking about things that went over my head. I had no idea what was going on. And then afterwards, he pulls me in his office. He's like, so before you can sit in that class, you need to take Physics 1, Physics 2. You need to take Chemistry 1. You need to take Calculus 1 and 2. All classes where I'm like, no. I don't like these. No. Statistics almost took me out, man. But he's like, you have to go through all these classes before you can even sit in that class. And I was like, okay, so what do I do? And he's like, you're going to have to do 5 years. Like, he's like laying it out the way the semester, he's like, you're going to have to do 5 years. And I'm like, you call my parents and tell them that, because 5 years is not acceptable. They want me to graduate in 4. So he's like, well, then you can't, he's like, you have a 1.9 GPA. You can't get below a 3.0 for the rest of your schooling. You can't, you're going to have to go through summer school, physics 1 and physics 2. You have to get at least a B in both of them. Long story short, 3 years later, he tells the story of this poor kid that walked in the wrong class, announcing me for the diploma. And I remember before I went up for the diploma, before we sat down in the speech, these kids were like, you know, we're graduating, and they're reminiscing about their college career and stuff. And they said, man, remember that poor kid 3 years ago that our teacher called out? We never saw that kid again. I was like, oh, that kid was me. I caught up, and I'm graduating with you fools. Let's go.
I love it, bro. I love that story. I love the fact that you kind of lean into that hard work and understood, like, hey, you know, like this grade that I had previously wasn't indicative to my intelligence, like you're kind of mentioning now. It's more towards finding your passion and really going towards that, and then putting the energy with that passion behind it. So I'm glad that all that worked out for you, Ted, and obviously you do such a great job on what I've seen outside perspective on camera. And one more question within the camera thing, then I want to go into like your podcast and everything in that realm is, how did you develop your communication skills? Was that in school as well? Was that something you learned when you went on camera? Were you doing side things? Is that like an important part in becoming a meteorologist or getting chosen with these big networks to do that position?
Yeah. So, I mean, and it plays into a lot of how I end up starting a podcast, because the schooling taught me public speaking. It taught me, I had to take acting classes. So my major was broadcast meteorology, which was pretty much studying and learning the science of weather, but also studying presentation, public speaking. I literally remember having to do monologues for movies in front of class. So we learned cadence, we learned tone, we learned resonance. We had to take voice class. I had to do all that. Even after school, I took acting classes for a little bit. All that, and improv classes. Can you think on your feet? So those were all through schooling, but then the cameras turn on and you forget all of it. And I'm not gonna lie, you forget all of it. So it took me 3 years to get in the business. That was a dark time for me. Worked at a law firm. I was thankful for the skills that I learned there, but you know, that was where my whole no rain, no rainbows model came from, right? I was depressed, had ulcerative colitis that I got diagnosed with, put me in the hospital for 2 weeks. It was rough. But I get through that. I get my first TV job, and I'm still trying to figure it out. And my first assistant news director sat down, and he said, listen, Ted, this career comes down to 2 things. Number 1, know what you're talking about. Know what you're talking about. And number 2, trust yourself. The rest is it. And I explain that to people like, okay, if I walk up to you and I'm like, Chris, I need you to fill 3 minutes on air, 3 minutes on the network TV, telling me about the thermodynamics of the upper atmosphere and how the triple pause is shrinking. You're gonna be like, oh snap, right?
How many times study?
You got to do it tomorrow or right now.
Yeah, okay. If it's right now, it's gonna be difficult.
What if I said, all right, right now I need you to go on air, 3 minutes. I need a real estate expert. I need to talk about real estate. Would you be able to talk about it for 3 minutes?
Well, yeah, actually, my previous career was real estate, so that I won't have any issue. And I
know that.
That's like, you just correlated something I know, but I kind of get what you're going, 100%.
And I tell that for everybody. Someone who collects sneakers, talk 3 minutes about sneakers. Somebody who's a big fan of the show Game of Thrones, talk about, I'm going to have a hard time keeping you to 3 minutes if you're talking about Game of Thrones. But it's just, if you know what you're talking about, there's no issue. There's no issue. And that's what really kind of broke the mold for me. And now when the camera turns on, hi to all the viewers and everything right now, to all the folks watching on Instagram, we appreciate the time. I hope you know, I'm not speaking to you. I'm speaking to my mom on FaceTime, right? I'm speaking to a good friend. That's who I'm speaking to. I'm speaking to somebody I care about. And that's what I see on the other side of that camera. So those are some of the mental tricks that have helped me find comfort, find my rapport on air, kind of be myself. Because if I'm talking to a friend, I can crack jokes, right? I could be myself. And what do people like? Authenticity. They want you to be yourself.
So I love that you mentioned that, and that correlates very well because I get the same question all the time as I'm blessed to be a professional speaker and speak in front of thousands of people around the world. Everybody asks me, Chris, are you nervous? And honestly, when they ask me, it's usually when I'm going to go on stage or the day of and all that. I'm like, no, not at all. And it's not because I'm greater than anybody, but if they would have asked me maybe 2 months before when I booked the gig, there's a little moment in time when I'm figuring out what I'm going to say that maybe I have a bit of nerves. But once I figured out and I kind of studied for it, it's kind of like that same ideology when you're Friday evening and you have an exam Monday, and then the whole weekend you don't do nothing. When Monday rolls around, your heart is beating, you're sweating. But if the whole weekend you studied, Monday rolls around, you're excited to go in and do that exam so the teacher could see like, oh my God, this dude did the work and get that A or that A plus. It's that same understanding. So if you put in the work, you're comfortable, and you have that ideology of not taking yourself too serious and just kind of like having that fun, which is what you just alluded to, I think is a winning scenario. So Ted, I do want to talk about your podcast. It has a very interesting name in regards to the Modern Man Podcast. What is your idea of a modern man in today's society in 2022 with what's happening in the world? Why did you start this podcast? And yeah, let's lean into that. What is that ideology for you of what a modern man should be?
Yeah. So I've been lucky enough to have a great father figure. Still have my dad in my life. So I'm really thankful for that. He's going to be 81 at the end of this month. He's had a huge impact on me. And when I moved away from home, he gave me this poem, If, by Rudyard Kipling. And one of the last lines says, if you could fill the unforgiven minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything in it. And what's more, you'll be a man, my son. And that culminates, I mean, it's a great poem. I encourage folks to look it up. But that just culminates, you know, the work ethic my dad put in me, the commitment to growth that my dad put in me. And when I moved away from home, I didn't notice it at first, but I worked really hard to cultivate some of these male mentorships. I was always the youngest out of all my friends. I always seeked older guys that, you know, give me counsel. And I just thought it was a natural thing. It wasn't until a few years later, I read a couple books. One was No More Mr. Nice Guy, which was someone I used to be. I remember I was trying to date. I was trying to be friends with women and not understanding kind of how to figure this whole thing out. And then I read No More Mr. Nice Guy, which taught me how to put myself as a priority and build myself up. Well, I realized that actually gravitated women to me, that gravitated job opportunities to me, right? When I built myself up, the things I was begging for in life and trying to be nice for actually became offered because I kind of showed that I was competent enough to handle it. And then the second book was Mask and Masculinity by Lewis Howes. It's probably on the bookshelf behind me here. And that opened up my eyes to this staggering suicide rate amongst men. Mm-hmm. And what I realized was me having that book, having the community of men around me is why I've gotten to where I got in life. And there are so many men who are suffering who did not have that community. There's a lot of men who are lonely. There are a lot of men who are recluses. They go to work, or maybe they're, and when I say lonely, it doesn't mean that they're single. I'm talking married men, lonely, right? Because when surveyed, most women, married women say, okay, who's your emotional support? My husband and my girlfriends. Most men, my wife. That's it. These guys don't have genuine male relationships. They might have some guys they can watch the game with. They can have some guys they can watch the fight with, have a beer with, right? But, you know, if their marriage is rocky, no one to call, right? If they're feeling uncertain, self-doubt, if they're having a hard time, no one to call. So I realized that, and I started Modern Man really with the goal of connecting men in pursuit of their potential. Just about building community, because we're not quick to be like, oh, I need help. But we are quick to help each other. Mm-hmm. Men are so selfless, man. It's amazing. It's amazing because what we want is we want to be valued. We want to help. We want to provide. We want to give. And in the world that we live in right now, where I've dated women who out-earned me, right? If my identity is on my earning potential, and again, the amazing availability for women to excel in the workplace nowadays, we can do better, of course. But for that, if I'm going to value my manhood on my ability to earn, okay, that's rocky. So you're going to have to find something else more concrete, my man, right? And that's the thing when I talk about a modern man is Modern in its definition is always changing. It's ever changing. It's modern with the times. So by a modern man, it's by the definition of what I give myself value is not going to be based on society's measurement. It's based on my own. It's going to be based on the impact that I have. How do I provide? It's the impact I have on my wife. Sometimes I provide by her being at work all day, and I'm going to make sure she comes home to a clean house so she doesn't have to worry about it, right? Or sometimes I provide by, hey, babe, you relax. I'm going to go handle what I have to handle. Those are the things that we have to kind of redefine for ourselves. And as I've started getting down that circle of realizing, okay, guys, we need to start talking about what's really happening because we're ignoring what's bothering us and we're lonely. And instead of seeking help, we're committing suicide 3.5 more times than women in 2018.
So, I mean, I love that you're alluding to this and we're having this conversation because I truly do believe men for so long have repressed their emotional state, calling it out of manliness or calling it out of that's who we are, that's what we do, towards our counterparts, our women in our lives are very, very well structured of how they feel, to speak about it, to be aware about it, and to understand happening, the ups and the downs. And I do believe that in the last, I would say, decade or so, men are being so much more awakened to their emotional tendencies. Even men in their feminine side, they're more allowed to get dressed a certain way, to take care of themselves a certain way, which back in, let's say, 30, 40, 50 years ago was alluded to negative misconceptions. And you're absolutely right. If you keep these negative emotions within you and you don't even understand what's happening, all that's creating is decay within you. You're literally killing yourself inside out. And that's literally scientifically proven. So to have these understanding, these conversation as man, you could talk about your emotions. You could literally cry in front of people, but that doesn't take out of your manliness. And your manliness is who you are with the confidence you have. And you alluded to dating somebody that has a bigger income than you. The only way you could do that is being understanding, like, hey, the income doesn't reflect who I am as a man, doesn't reflect who she is as a woman, doesn't reflect our relationship. And for that to happen is you have to have real understanding of who you are and that piece of like, hey, I'm a man doing like this and this is what I'm comfortable with. So I love the fact that you're alluding. And one last thing, because I do want to be respectful for your time here, Ted, but as we're talking about this, what are some of the tricks, tools, or methodologies that you give to your community or men around you that are having a hard time or getting into this new world of being comfortable with their manliness, with even their feminine side? What are some things that you tell them to do? Is it meditating? Is it talking with friends? Is it X, Y? What would you speak to that?
What I say is challenge, right? I think as men, a lot of our innate goal and for our masculinity is feeling worthy, right? You know, there's a lot of cultures in the past that have had the rite of passage, right? We look for that validation, and I think we can validate ourselves by doing hard things, whether it's going to the gym, whether it's challenging yourself to stay disciplined towards a goal. One thing I mentioned, hey, let's start with this. Get off the snooze button, you know? Tell yourself you're going to wake up at 6 and wake up at 6. No negotiation. You're up at 6. And that's what you start in terms of learning self-discipline, but you also build that self-confidence, right? Because one thing you alluded to about our values is, or how we measure ourselves is based on our values, right? So if we could say our values, I'm a dependable guy. I do what I'm going to say. If I tell you I'm going to be there, and I want to be there, I'm going to be there, even if it's going to be hard for me to be there. I'm going to embrace that discomfort. That's one of our pillars. We talk about the modern man connecting men in pursuit of their potential. And we do that by cultivating community, embracing discomfort, and of course, putting wind in each other's sails. Because that community is going to be helpful to get you to your other side. But if you're not willing to embrace discomfort, you're not going to get to where you want to go. So I say do hard things, and sure, meditation is a part of it, right? And there's things I've worked on in terms of like time blocking and cold showers in the morning. Cold therapy is something we're going to be talking on the podcast here soon. I'm really excited for that. Just started doing breath work. These are things that I'm starting to tap into, that I'm realizing, identifying my thoughts, sitting in silence, but also staying true to the commitments that I give, has given me confidence to do this journey, because I'm not where I want to be yet as a man. But for the guys that I talk to, I encourage them to start that journey by maybe just start by getting off the snooze button. Wake up when you say you're going to, and slowly build that confidence in yourself in doing what you say you're going to do. And then you're going to kind of, once you have that confidence, then you're going to look for what to commit to next. Ooh, I'm off the snooze button. Maybe let me commit to a routine. Oh, let me add meditation. It's all about the mindset that you can set up by getting off that snooze button.
So essentially put in the proper habits and rituals within your day, especially in the start of your day, so it could roll to a positive momentum, and then it just get bigger and bigger and bigger as it compounds over time.
Do you mind if I expand on that really quick? I know we're short on time.
Go for it.
You mentioned habits, and I was just learning more about cognitive behavioral therapy, right? And there's 3 things that impact us, right? There's our feelings, our thoughts, and our behaviors, and they impact each other. Now, our feelings could impact our thoughts, and it can impact the way we behave. The way we behave could literally impact how we feel. If you smile, you'll start to feel better, which is why I lean on get off the snooze button, because if we have the habits that build our behaviors, that's going to impact our emotions, which will then trickle into our thoughts. It's hard to control our thoughts. If I said, don't think about an elephant, you're thinking about an elephant. There's your thoughts infiltrated right there. It's hard to control your feelings. If something bad happens, I said, don't feel bad or don't be mad. You get mad because you just told me not to be mad. But the behaviors is what we can control, and that is why I focus on that, because then it can impact your thoughts and your feelings, and everything else will trickle from there.
100%. And I love that you're mentioning this, because the behaviors is your physiology. If you control your body, control your state, then that will trigger towards a positive behavior. The positive behavior is going to control a different focus, which is going to give you a different outcome. If you always have the same action, it's going to create the same focus, and it's going to give you the same results. So that's the kind of the circular motion that we're going towards. Ted, my brother, I feel like we were talking until tomorrow morning, but like I said, so fun, and we're definitely gonna have other moments to chat together. One last thing is, where's the best place for our community to connect with you if they're interested to listen to your podcast, or just to see you on TV just doing your amazing stuff? Where's the best way to connect with you?
Yeah, well, if you're watching here right here on Instagram at The Real Phaeton Forecast, I'm sure you might be able to tap and something. I'll even put a little comment while I'm doing this. I'm going to put a T. That's me. You can follow me right there, or you can follow The Modern Man Podcast on Instagram. Go to themodernmanpodcast.com for all of our shows. We're connecting men in pursuit of their potential. I really believe in the work that we're doing, and I'm excited for the value that these guys are getting and the conversations that we're having. It really needs to be mainstream. It needs to be front and center, and I would encourage everybody to seek their own journey out there. And I thank you for any likes, any follows. That means the world to me, and I appreciate you, and I would love you to reciprocate that for my followers. Give Chris a follow as well.
Ted, man, my brother, I truly appreciate that. Everything you mentioned will be in the show notes below, so they'll be able to connect with you. And like I said, definitely looking forward in a couple of weeks to have this great conversation and continue it on your podcast. So we're going to have some fun with that as well. So my brother, have a phenomenal day. Sleep a bit this weekend. I'm guessing you could sleep in a bit, and then Monday morning you're off back to it.
Yep. Have a wonderful one, Chris. Thanks so much for having me.
All right. Ciao, brother.